Please be seated.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, we are back on. Defense present, represented by counsel. Anything from the state before we bring the panel in?
Yes, Judge. Judge, last week, when we had one of our officer witnesses on the stand, we had been talking to him about the number of crimes in Satilla Shores, and the state did not have a certified copy of the Glenn County Police spreadsheet that had been created via the Spillman report. And so the state stopped asking that officer about that per the objection by the defense. Mr. Sheffield then got up and then asked the officer specifically about whether he'd researched the burglary, researched these 3 or 4 entering autos, and then started on the suspicious calls, at which point I objected because suspicious calls to me were not at that point relevant. Once again, I think the court then said, well, do you have a certified copy of all of that? At the court's suggestion, the state went, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get a certified copy and have Cherie Batchelor over at Glenn County PD provide me with that spreadsheet just so we can see the number of police calls in that 14-month period, 126 of them. Majority of them are neighborhood patrols, and a neighborhood patrol, as my understanding, is just a officer-initiated patrol. And you know, an officer goes, hey, I'm over in Satilla, I'm reporting in, I'm going to patrol this area, neighborhood patrol. So when I received it from Ms. Cherie Batchelor, she certified it on November 10th, which was last Wednesday. I then gave a copy to all 3 defense counsel the next morning. I believe it was November 11th. I don't think it was the day I got it served, but I handed them a copy going, here's my certified copy of all of these things, and I may use it, obviously, with Mr. Dial. This morning, half an hour ago, as I was sitting in the courtroom about to put up the medical examiner, I was handed this, which was certified on November 11th, last Thursday. Was not handed to me Thursday, was not handed to me on Friday so I could prepare over the weekend, and wasn't handed to me yesterday. It was handed to me this morning at 8:30. It contains 68 police reports. I have done my best in the half an hour allotted to me while I should be preparing for my direct of my witnesses to go through all of these police reports. And Judge, what I have found, I'm showing the court, I've tried to tab it. The pink tabs are cases that are already before the jury. Those are Larry English and Travis McMichael's gun and Greg McMichael's 911 call on July 13th. So they're included in here. The blue ones are all just neighborhood patrols. I'll pull a random one up. For example, at 9:10 in the morning on November 7th of 2019, we have a neighborhood patrol at Zellwood and Satilla. And its comments. M. Browning takes a report from Officer Powers, 10-4, include Burford, Holmes, and Jones Road. So we have an officer patrolling. That's all this is. And that's all the blue ones. Now, the green ones are really interesting because we've got personal problems of the residents of Satilla Shores. For instance, I'll randomly pull up a police report from August 23rd, suspicious person. But when you actually read this, Gene Weeks is over at 168 Zellwood, and the caller just drove up to his home and there's a car parked on the inside of the fence and backed up against his fence. He doesn't know the car. He wants the police to come out. He doesn't understand what's going on. The end of the call is, made contact with the vehicle owner and the property owner via phone, and it was all just a miscommunication. The vehicle is actually allowed to be on the property. So that's just one random one. I'll pull up the last random one I looked at. 159 Zellwood. We have on December 14th of 2019, we have Miriam Nicole Weeks, who's living with Rob Ray, calling up, reporting a burglary because she had rented a room from Mr. Ray for a few years. She was moving out. She's been gone for the past 2, I think, weeks. And when she came back, She found miscellaneous tools were missing from her bedroom, and she said her bedroom was secured and had a padlock on it, but she wants to report, this issue with her roommate. So this is the kind of stuff we're looking at. And so, Judge, first off, we have a discovery violation. This was never served on the state, and when they obtained it, they certainly didn't provide it right away to the state. So we ask that it all be excluded based on that. In addition, it's irrelevant. Unless someone in this case knew all about this and had seen these police reports and knew about robbery and all this. I mean, here's the thing, Judge. I do know that Investigator Dial did look at a number of these reports. He did do his job. I believe he testified at the preliminary hearing that there was this burglary call that was a roommate dispute, which is the one I just mentioned to you. The other burglary call he mentioned was completely unfounded, an alarm going off. And he did look into these things. So at this point in time, questioning him about these sorts of calls, I guess we could do it, but the problem is the state's been blindsided and is now completely, not completely, but unprepared really to do this, and I haven't even gotten through all of them. The other problem is a lot of this is irrelevant. Officer-initiated patrols in Satilla Shores. Officers initiate patrols randomly all the time. And the personal problems of the residents of Satilla Shores, such as, I'm randomly picking another call from 11/30/19 at 119 Zellwood. And this is basically a young man is calling in because he's hiding in the closet. Someone's trying to get in their door. They're rattling on the door. There's 4 people hiding in the closet. The police show up and find absolutely nothing. The nature has changed from a burglary to a suspicious person. So some kids at a house got upset. They did the right thing. They called the police. The police came out. Totally a false alarm. Found absolutely nothing. How this is relevant to the killing of Ahmaud Arbery or the guilt or innocence of these defendants, the state is unaware, especially those types of reports. So I wanted to make the court aware of this and ask that this be excluded. Thank you.
Morning, Judge. I'm holding in my hand a document provided to us by the state, certified copy of all of the 911 calls over January 1st, 2019 through February and beyond. We've just gone and gotten the CADs of all these calls, Judge. That's it. State gave us this information. I'm not sure what Ms. Dunikoski's talking about. This is the, I'll approach if you'll let me.
Explain to me how the two connect.
Yeah, this is a report of the stack of papers that we just went and actually got the reports of. So Ms. Dunikoski gave us this list. Incident number 1, neighborhood patrol on 1/1/19. Number 2, shots fired, 1/1/19. Number 3, neighborhood patrol 1/7/19. Number 4, citizens assist, 1/26/19. And the list goes on and on and on. This was generated for the state, who gave us a certified copy of it in reciprocal discovery. Now what we did, Judge, is we went to
Yeah,
The-
we just got that days ago.
okay.
It's dated.
Okay, well, this is the certified copy that I guess they gave us in trial, but this list of cases is a list of cases that's been about the neighborhood. They just pull all the 911 calls in the neighborhood. So we've pulled the CAD reports for that. And we had a lady come in and testify.
Police reports associated with the
CAD reports, Judge, CAD reports. Those are the computer automated dispatch report that comes out. And there's maybe other reports with some of them because they're more detailed.
Trying to get on the same page with you. You're showing me the document that you have, which is the CAD reports. What I
I'm
thought.
just showing you a list. That's all this is a list.
Okay.
Can I show it to you?
Let me just make sure I understand
Okay.
what's out there. Because what you were saying was there were the CAD reports, and these are police reports associated with the CAD reports, but this is a different list.
Yeah, I'm just starting from the beginning. We were given a list of incidents where the police were called in Satilla Shores. Now, this is just a list. It's a 6-page list of all the 911 calls, just noted by incident number, the nature of the call, the area, the reported time and date, and the disposition. And it just lists them one by one, and it goes from January 1st, 19. This list goes actually all the way through May 25th of
The document
2020.
you have in your hand was provided in discovery. This was, explain to me what that is again. That's the
Yeah,
cert.
this was provided and I believe exchanged in discovery, which is just a list of all the 911 calls. Okay. I guess on November 10th, the affidavit of custodians of records was signed by Cherry Bachelor, who testified in court. And that's dated November 10th. All right, and I think Ms. Bachelor was used to get in specific calls and things like that that became relevant to the case. So in terms of knowing about these cases, the state has known about these cases throughout the period of reciprocal discovery. What we have said is that we intend to demonstrate that there was a lot of concerned neighbors in the neighborhood of Satilla Shores. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of extra patrols. There were a lot of extra watches requested, and there were a lot of suspicious persons. And our goal is simply to note the location, the house that was called, that made the phone call, the date, and the nature of the call. Either suspicious person or neighborhood patrol or extra watch. These are things, to a certain extent, Officer Rash has testified about. He said, you know, I've patrolled that whole neighborhood. I've gone up and down the streets. I've done extra watch. We've talked about the nature of a suspicious person's call. We've had evidence about that. We've had what neighborhood patrol is, what extra watch is. And so all we're doing, and Ms. Dunikoski, maybe we should have talked before, but what we are seeking to do is simply establish that there is a high volume of suspicious person calls in this neighborhood, and that there is a lot of extra patrolling going on in this neighborhood, and that a lot of that then bled into the Facebook page, which we'll deal with through our witnesses. But what we're seeking to do is tender these documents into evidence, not have them go out with the jury, not call a witness to come in and testify about all the details of what happened with that, but just to establish that there are suspicious persons calls being made by the neighbors in the neighborhood, that there are extra patrols happening, and that there are extra watches happening in this neighborhood. And what we would intend to do is simply use the date or the nature of the call and the address it's associated with. And so those documents, we want to put them in. They're authenticated and they survive. We have the business record exception of the document. We have that certification by the custodian. They are now self-authenticating and they are business records, so they would be admissible on that certification alone. And then what we would do is just simply tender to the jury in our case, there was a call for suspicious person on this date at this residence. And if the state wants to go through them and disagree with that this suspicious person was resolved as irrelevant, then we certainly can do that. But we would simply want to establish that there are calls about suspicious persons in and around property, that there are requests for extra watch, there are requests and there are extra patrols being done, which establishes that this neighborhood is experiencing a high volume of crime, which is then being discussed amongst a lot of the neighbors, and we'll have testimony about that, which is also then being discussed with Travis McMichael, and he is also aware. He doesn't have to be aware of every call that's happened. every time 911 is called, but it is a fact that is relevant to this case, that this is a neighborhood that's experiencing a lot of crime and the police are focused on it. It would be consistent and it would corroborate a lot of the testimony that we've had. And so to the extent that it does corroborate that testimony and it establishes just very basic facts of what's happening in the neighborhood, we think it's relevant and it supports our defense of this neighborhood being essentially on edge and under attack. So I understand the nature of Ms. Dunikoski's objection in going in, but we're not intending to call all those witnesses to come testify. We're simply interested in the nature of the call and the time period of these calls.
Sounds like you're trying to characterize those two.
We're not. We're going to say suspicious person call made on this date by this residence. We've already had testimony about what a suspicious person call is. We've had testimony on extra patrol. We've had testimony on neighborhood patrol by Officer Rash. We simply want to corroborate that with these documents. We're not going to get into all the details of what that is. It's that people are dialing 911 consistently, starting in January, which we were made aware of by the state, starting in January. We're not doing things like Citizens Assist. If that's included, that may just be, but we're really interested in neighborhood watch.
For example, Citizens Assist.
Yeah, that's not one that's really relevant. That could be somebody who fell down.
So, for example, I'm trying to figure out how you're not going to start getting into what these documents are. So you plan on asking Dial about this?
Well, Dial, we certainly could ask about his investigation and his understanding of what was happening in Satilla Shores and how he may have investigated that.
So how do you plan to use this?
When we present our case, we intend to say, Your Honor, at this time, we seek to admit defense exhibit, number, put it in the record. Then, at that time, if it's admitted, then I will say on January 1st, 2019, there was a neighborhood patrol that was conducted. On January 7th, 2019, there was another neighborhood patrol conducted. On January 30th, 19, there was a theft entering auto reported. On March 20th, 19, there was another neighborhood patrol. On March 23rd, 19, there was a suspicious person reported. On March 26th, 19, there was a neighborhood patrol. And go so on. And that's it. I want to establish that the citizens are calling and requesting police intervention. This is not a new subject to the case. This is one that has been discussed. But again, we want to corroborate what we've asked on cross-examination. So there's no unfair surprise. And we're not going to get into all of the details of it. Certainly the state, we can, if they want to go one by one, we can do that. But that's our intention.
And are you going to link this up to anything the defendants knew, or you're just going to say this is what was out there as far as this record?
This is, what we're doing in our case in chief, just essentially and generally to try to respond to the court's question. We are calling residents of this neighborhood, residents who have experienced their own crime, residents who have participated in the discussions on the Facebook page to which Travis McMichael and his father and family had access and looked at. We will be linking that up through testimony that's relevant to Travis McMichael. And this corroborates essentially those witnesses and other people in the neighborhood who have experienced problems. These are public records, Judge.
I understand.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything for the other defendants?
Yes, Your Honor. Teresa, can you hear me here? I'll pop up there. Just to point out that when we began the trial, course, we had the initial list that the state had provided. It became clear after the opening statement and several witnesses, beginning with Officer Duggan, that there was an attempt by the state to characterize through minimization what was going on in Satilla Shores from about October 2019 to February 2020. There was a question, can you describe the level of crime? They get their fair share, and the court is not going to recall this, I'm sure, but
No, I remember testimony about Baker 9,
and
what the officer's impression of the level of calls and all of that were.
yes.
So that's why I'm wondering why this wasn't discussed with that officer, why that testimony wouldn't have been challenged.
Because there had been an attempt by the state, I believe it was Ms. Olivier doing Officer Duggan. So not much, she said, not much. And I objected, no, that's a characterization. And he stood for himself and said, yeah, their fair
No,
share.
there was more than Duggan, I thought.
But Duggan's not the Baker
please don't
9
cut me
man.
Please don't cut me off on.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm just, because I'm trying to work through this. I remember at least one, maybe more officers that were asked about activity in Baker 9 and what their call volumes were and the types of calls that they were responding to.
Yes, and I agree with you in a general way. But the state has, in one portion of their case, attempting to minimize, and has said that there were 3 entering in autos, one of them was Travis's, and 1 burglary, which turned out to be not a burglary. Our position is, if you're living in a neighborhood where patrol cars are coming out to respond to these calls, whether or not it turns out to be something that was confirmed, whether or not a suspicious person was located, this raises, as we'll be able to show in the Facebook page, people's level of concern. So the question of the timing of all this and how we intend to introduce it and why now deals with, it is in a direct response to the state's desire to minimize what had been going on in the neighborhood, which the neighbors will, I think, directly refute.
Mr. Collins.
Your Honor, on behalf of Defendant Bryan, I want to adopt the response of the counsel for the co-defendants in this case. And really, there's one specific issue I want to address. I think I've noticed to the court that we sometimes feel like the red-headed stepchild sitting over there in the corner. And I've noted before that we tend not to get served with things from the co-defendants in this case. For the record, I'm holding the document that Ms. Dunkowski was holding up earlier. I think this is the first time that I've seen it. Actually, I haven't read it yet. I guess there's a little bit of trust there, but I'm going to adopt it. And as far as discovery purposes, to the extent that's still a concern for the court, this is the first I have possession or knowledge of the document. This is the earliest opportunity that I could use it. And therefore, I think that there is no discovery issue there, because I would join the McMichael defendants in wishing to present this document in Defendant Bryan's case in chief. Thank you, Your Honor.
Final word from the state.
Thank you, Judge. I think Mr. Sheffield actually made my point for me. The document I served on them is the Spillman list. I attempted to get Parker Marcy to talk about it, if you'll recall. I asked him specifically, did I ask you to verify the Spillman list? I asked you to look at this list and pull up these various things, this burglary call and these entering auto calls, the few that were on the list of 126 over 14 months. And he was prepared to testify to that and to talk about them. They objected. They stopped the state from doing this and going into this. And at that,
I'd like to be heard on that afterwards.
And then after he goes, I'd like another chance to come back, because I never seem to be able to get the last word. But I would,
Happened in court.
From the state.
thank you, Judge. The list that I had Ms. Batchelor, Lieutenant Batchelor, certify was served in discovery. And it was served in discovery back in, I think, the end of 2020, so everybody had that list and knew about that list. The anticipation would be that, of course, someone would testify to the number. I want to point out to the court a couple of really important things. In opening statement, Mr. Rubin got up here and said, Satilla Shores was a neighborhood on edge due to the crime. So what's the state supposed to do? We're supposed to, like, not address that issue? They brought it up in opening statement. It's been a theme. It's been a drumbeat with the defense constantly. This neighborhood's on edge. All these people are having, backyard conversations now electronically via Facebook, and everybody knows. Mr. Sheffield just told you the purpose for this. He just told you, we're going to argue the neighborhood was under attack. He just told you that's exactly what they want this evidence in for, to show that this neighborhood was under attack. The problem is unless I'm allowed to address that we got roommates that are having problems, the neighborhood's not under attack. We got somebody who thinks a car's not supposed to be there, and oh, lo and behold, it is supposed to be there. One of the guys on the green tab called up because his subcontractor showed up on the wrong day, and he was calling the police because the subcontractor wasn't supposed to be there. So this idea that the neighborhood is on edge, I mean, at that point, Your Honor, absolutely. If this is allowed in, I'm going to go through every single one of these with Dial so he can explain to the jury that this call came in and it was miscommunication. This call came in about some roommates. And the idea that Travis McMichael knew about some roommate disagreement inside a house, the idea that somebody called up and said, I can't find my credit card, and Travis McMichael knew all about that, I mean, it's ridiculous. The list that I provided to them, that Mr. Sheffield just said he would go through that list. He said he wanted to go ahead and do the date and the nature of the call. What I served on them, which Parker Marcy was going to talk about, was the nature and the date of the call. Now, he wants to add in the location of that call, which is why now he wants to tender all of these in. So, Judge, I guess it's a double-edged sword. If we're going to go down this route, then I'm going to go down it fully. I do have a problem with the fact that I don't recall anybody talking about what extra patrols were or extra watches were requested. I don't recall anyone testifying to what those things were. I don't think Officer Rash did, or how those things are initiated. And of course, none of this was discussed with any of the actual officers, such as Parker Marcy and Officer Rash, as to these calls. In fact, I think I asked Officer Rash about Rob Ray and the roommate thing, and he didn't know anything about it. So at this point, their argument is this high volume of calls. I guess the other argument they want to make is the neighborhood's under attack. Look at this high volume of calls we have, therefore that leads us to believe the neighborhood's under attack. Look at the extra patrols that were being initiated by officers, therefore this must be an entire neighborhood that's under attack. And none of it actually is relevant, because unless Travis McMichael knew that Officer Powers on November 11th at 9 o'clock in the morning initiated an extra patrol, what relevancy does it have to his state of mind? Because he doesn't know about any of these things. I mean, maybe he's going to go, yeah, I was totally tuned in. I knew every time an officer while I was at work at Metzen Marine, I certainly knew these officers were doing these extra patrols. If he's going to testify to that, that's fine. But there's no connection between any of these things. So, Your Honor, we ask that this either, I guess, be completely excluded, or I guess that you allow the state to thoroughly ask Agent Dial about each and every single one of these, and we'll go through them one by one so the jury understands the nature of my subcontractor turned up on a wrong day. Hey, there's a car that's here. Oh, it turns out it's a miscommunication. Hey, there's suspicious people walking down the street. Oh, Mr. Bowie actually does live at that house. Our bad, we didn't mean to call 911. So I guess we either put it all in or we don't put anything in. Because just to go, here's the number of calls, so therefore this neighborhood was under attack, and here's the big sheaf of papers, That's unfair to the state. And so if we're going to do this game, the state's going to walk the jury through every single one of these calls. And by the way, in here, there are police reports attached to these. So they're not just 911 CADs. There's actual police reports attached inside here with narratives and investigations. There's also citizen assists in here. So when Mr. Sheffield said, oh, we pulled the citizen assist out, that's not relevant, I immediately turned and found one that said citizen assist within here. Here's a copy of a police report right there attached to it. So, you know, and this is about accessing a hard drive by an officer. That's the kind of stuff that's included in this. We ask that it be excluded. Either we go down the road totally, or we don't go down the road at all. Thank you.
You want to I don't want additional argument. You want to clarify the record.
Yes, please, Your Honor, thank you. We haven't even offered this yet. We've just given her the stack of papers. She hasn't even- We're not offering it into evidence right now.
Let's do this then. I want the three things that were just referenced. I want to see what that stack of documents is.
Okay,
I want to see what was there was a CAD report
okay.
list
Yes.
that I understand was produced, and then there was another certified copy. I want to see what those three are,
Got it?
and I want to know when they were produced.
Okay. The list was produced to us in reciprocal discovery. So we'll give you a copy of that list.
Okay.
We intend to pull from, we printed off everything from that and just gave it to the state. We haven't even marked them or offered them into evidence yet. The state is a little premature on this because we have to pull the ones that we're gonna use. We can do that.
No, I want to see what's produced, because as I understand it, we're either a day or two away from the end of the state's case in chief.
Yeah.
I want to know what was produced in discovery and what was just produced, and there were three documents that were referenced. I want to see them, I want to understand what they are,
Okay.
so that I have a way to cross-reference what we're talking about.
Perfect. And then to comply with just responding, Ms. Dunikoski says it's a discovery violation. This was provided to us by her.
Well, hold on a second. I just said I don't want argument. You said
It's
that
not-
there was something she said in the record that you needed to
Yes.
clarify.
This officer, the officer up here, was asked to look at the Spillman report and draw a conclusion about whether Ahmaud Arbery was responsible or identified with the thefts or burglaries. That's what we objected to. If you recall, we said this.
Yeah, and I'll go back through notes and try to work through, but the dispute came up when he was specifically asked about burglaries in the neighborhood, and that was objected to because there were no certified records, and we couldn't get in, and the court wouldn't allow the way the state was going about it to get that in. I'll go back and look at it.
Okay.
But I appreciate you pointing it out.
Yeah, I disagree with that. But it was more about his conclusion and opinion of whether or not Ahmaud Arbery was involved. And we said, this officer was not involved in those investigations, so he'll just be reading reports from other people, which is all hearsay, and making a determination if
Right.
Arbery was involved.
And we stopped there, and I said, certified, as long as we get certified. So now it's certified, and you want to present to the jury
Well, that's what the
yourself
court
the
said.
certified report, correct?
What we want to present is we don't want to, it's not going to go out. What we want to do is we want to establish essentially that list plus the address.
All right. Like I
Of
said,
the
if I-
only relevant ones, Your Honor, sorry. Just of the relevant ones, the suspicious person, extra watch, and neighborhood patrol. Not so-and-so, hiding out and it's a mistake. We don't want to
So-
present those.
So just so I'm clear, so what was produced to the state today then, it's actually a more narrow list?
It will become more narrow when we present it in our case in chief.
Okay. Two things then. I want to see the three whatever documents.
I'm not sure I know what the third one is, Judge.
Well, there was,
The list plus the stack.
plus some,
Oh, the certification.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, Your Honor, just because I need to clarify this.
let me
Okay.
just finish my thought. And I also assume that based on this, there's going to be some discussion so that maybe this can be narrowed down even further, because we are, as I understood it, a day or two away at this point from where the state had intended to end its case in chief. And so you know, if there's additional time and additional witnesses, I guess everybody needs to figure that out. And that's part of what the court needs to factor into all of this with these documents. I don't need a response to that. I just need the documents. We're belaboring the point at this point. And I indicated that state had the last word. I'd simply ask, you jumped up because you wanted to clarify the record.
Yeah.
I don't need additional argument.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Your Honor, I'm going to give you the state's official certified copy that I received from Lieutenant Batchelor on November 10th. This is the copy I've received. I tabbed it as best I could at 68. And so that we know, the best I can do is right now is pull this up. And the thing is, Judge, this was served on us by the defense. This certified copy that I made was just a certified copy of what they had served on me via the McMichaels Discovery Store and Go. It was due October 30th. It's dated October 29th. It says all calls list from 1/1/2019. So they actually got it from Cherie Batchelor back then, served it on us. I was using it as their exhibit with Parker Marcy. I'd send it to him going, look, the defense gave us this. Please verify it. Please pull it up on Spillman. I can take a photo shot of this if you want to see it so that you know what I'm talking about as far as the discovery goes.
As much information as I can get on what the documents are that we're talking about would be helpful.
I will take a screenshot of it and email it to an appropriate person that I will be given later, right?
Yes.
I will do that right now.
Why don't you use the same email you generally use from my office?
Yes, sir.
While she's doing that, without taking up any more additional time, Your Honor, may I also say that the actual reports could have just been used for impeachment purposes if the state had used Agent Dial to talk, as we were concerned she would, talk about the low amount of crime in Satilla Shores by just using the Spillman list. We did not have to provide any of that to the state. We could have simply used those reports if we felt the agent was not being accurate or complete in the summarization of those reports. So the issue of discovery violation does not seem to apply here. The issue of the state now wanting to go into all of these reports suggests to me that what we were concerned about is actually what the state intended to do, and that is to say, look at this couple-page printout of Spillman. Just tell us really about a couple of instances where you had to go out there. And so it's a good thing that we pulled the actual reports to keep everyone on the right page and accurate in an agent's summarization of a Spillman report for which he had no involvement.
As counsel knows, there's a big difference between impeachment evidence and what I understand this was going to be presented as part of the defendant's case in chief, the way it's presented. There's differences there.
Absolutely, but
Okay,
the first
so-
way it could have come in was that way.
But that's not what we're talking about, and Dial hasn't testified to. So that's not what was just presented to the court. So there's a couple different ways evidence can be used, and that, depending on the evidence of Agent Dial or any other officer that may have been out there that's already testified that was not impeached with this evidence. Yeah, there's a couple different ways, but I've got to look at the other part of this too, which is using the evidence in the way that was just described. So.
Certainly, and I just remind the court, there's two defendants here, though while we worked in concert in many ways, it is the position that we certainly could have used them in impeachment.
Three defendants.
Two defendants with respect to the presentation of the use of this evidence.
Okay. Just didn't want Mr. Goff to know that his argument went unheard by the court.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
And I have sent that email with the screenshot of the discovery.
All right. All right, we made it through one party and any preliminary matters. Anything from Travis McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
For Mr. Bryan.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm not sure that I would describe it as an invitation from the court yesterday, but this morning we did file a motion to prohibit any further conduct that may intimidate or influence jurors and otherwise interfere with a fair trial. The clerk has the original. I miscounted and did not make enough copies for the court to have a courtesy copy. It raises the same issues, perhaps with more authority than were raised previously, and the attached exhibits present the basis for the motion in more detail, perhaps, than had been provided the other day. And I think that given the nature of the issue, if the court's going to address it, it would be one that we addressed before we proceeded this morning. Certainly, if we're going to be documenting the individuals in the gallery for the rest of the trial, the sooner we start doing that, the better off we would be. Having said that, I also let the court know that, shocking as it may be, I desperately need a bathroom break. And I was going to suggest that perhaps the court would want to digest that motion and consider whether to allow any further argument about it at that time.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute recess, and then we will bring the jury back in. I understand the medical examiner is the next witness.
Correct, Judge.
Let's get to the witness in 10 minutes.